Need more energy throughout the day? Looking for a kick to your workout? RockinThatIDLife.com has you covered with delicious flavors you've grown to love in tropical fruit and mixed berry, but now fall in love with the new fruit punch and orange flavors. Try them all at RockinThatIDLife.com.
Realtor Mike Burgoyne with Real Brokerage LLC makes the moving process easier. Work with a realtor who plays and studies the game and will work as hard as the boys on the ice to get you the best deal. Check out Mike on the web at strikewithmike.com and jumpstart your move today. That's strikewithmike.com.
It is the third episode of the Let's Go Blues Radio Summer Series. I'm your host, Jeff Ponder. Thanks for tuning in this week as we are again talking about the future of the St. Louis Blues. Support for Let's Go Blues Radio is brought to you in part by RockinThatIDLife.com, where we help you make every workout, every meal count, do life better. And by Mike Burgoyne of Real Brokerage Realty. Use strikewithmike.com to search properties in your area and to contact Mike, who will help put you in your dream home or sell your current home. And by Center Ice Brewery, which serves St. Louis with flavorful hockey-themed beer. Find your new favorite brew at local grocery stores and liquor stores throughout the St. Louis area. This is franchise episode number 412 all time, and this is season 12, episode 3. Well, we've got a special guest and a friend of the show in Mike Morreale of NHL.com to talk about who the Blues may be targeting in the upcoming draft, now that we know where they'll be drafting. But first, let's talk about the ever-popular NHL Draft Lottery. So in case you missed the show, the Blues did stand pat at number 10, so they will be picking there with their first pick, and that is the Blues pick, their actual pick. Still awaiting, well, as of the recording of this, seeing where Dallas and Toronto will finish to see where their other two picks will be. But it's looking like they are going to be out in the second round. Well, maybe not Dallas, but definitely Toronto, unless they can overcome some craziness. Okay, so number 10, that's great. We'll talk about that more here with Mike in a minute. But the big news out of the NHL Draft Lottery, and it does affect the St. Louis Blues, and it's the shocker of the century as the pick goes to the, I almost said the Columbus Blue Jackets. They wish the Chicago Blackhawks got the number 1 pick. And I say it's a shocker of the century because that was the speculation from everyone. If this is rigged, it's going to go to Chicago. And clearly they did. They got the pick, even though they had the third best odds at 11.5%. Anaheim and Columbus both had better odds, but they fell. This was, again, it was of no surprise to anyone. And it's not just the rig thing. It's the of all the teams anybody wants to see Connor Bedard go to, it's the Chicago Blackhawks are up there as a team that nobody wanted, except for Chicago fans, obviously. If you follow me on Twitter, you saw me kind of lose it with this pick just because the draft coverage was bad. Kevin Weeks had a slip up that made it. I mean, you want to talk about, is this thing rigged? Well, you have a major slip up where you basically announced that there was somebody who fell in the draft like Columbus before you even announce the pick itself. Such a lapse in coverage. Do better, ESPN and NHL. That was just, you can't have that. And listen, I don't want to get too much into the weeds here. We've talked about situations involving the Blackhawks the last couple years on this show, so I'm not going to get too deep into that. All I'm going to say is they should not have had a first-round pick, in my opinion, this year. Maybe last year, maybe next year. There should have been something with the Brad Aldrich situation. They forfeited $2 million, which they've already made that up. They've already got, I think I saw as of Tuesday morning, they had already had $2.5 million in new season ticket holder people wanting to come see Connor Bedard. So they've already, that's a drop in the bucket for the Chicago Blackhawks. Arizona held pre-draft workouts, which they said they were unaware that they broke any rules. They lost a first-round pick. New Jersey signed Ilya Kovalchuk to a contract that they deemed was not legal at the time. They lost a first-round pick. Let's not forget that in 1999, the St. Louis Blues were forced to send the New Jersey Devils $1.4 million and the Devils' choice of one first-round pick in the next 5 years because of tampering with Scott Stevens 5 years earlier in 1994. He was offer sheeted by Jack Quinn, who was no longer with the organization. But the Chicago Blackhawks, they cover up sexual abuse throughout the entire organization, not just a couple people, not just one person, but they end up with Connor Bedard. Sexual abuse? Nah, we don't punish that. That's all I'll say about it. It's just you expect more from the NHL. More should have been done. And, if you want to say, well, those people were fired, they were all let go, the Joel Quenneville's, even if you want to say the Patrick Kanes and Jonathan Taves, they're gone too, the Duncan Keiths. But still, again, the precedence was already set under Gary Bettman's watch with the Blues. That's why I brought up the 1999 thing with the Devils. Jack Quinn, he was the man who did that. He was not with the organization when they passed this judgment, yet the Blues still had to pay with a draft pick and with money. So, again, precedence was set. Nothing happened. Very disappointed in the NHL on that. Something more should have been done. Guest today, Mike Morreale, a writer over at NHL.com and a host of the NHL Draft Class podcast. He's going to talk with us today about who the Blues could take at number 10, or even with their later first-round picks that they have from the Rangers trade, but Dallas's pick, and, of course, the Toronto pick as well. We talk about Connor Bedard, Adam Fantilli. Are they as good as we're hearing? Yes. The answer is yes, but here in more detail, what Mike has to think of those players, as well as many other. I mean, this stacked first round that we keep hearing about. Actually, just the whole draft itself is stacked. This is all stuff that we talk about in detail here. So you're in for a fun one if you're interested in the upcoming NHL draft. Reminder, we have our votes going right now for the Blues' all-time team. You can vote on our polls over on our Twitter page at LGB Radio. Currently running, if you're listening to this on, at premiere Wednesday night, podcast Thursday, Friday, whatever. We run these polls for a week. Running right now is the second vote for right-handed defenseman. That is Alex Pietrangelo, Jeff Brown, and Kevin Shattenkirk. So go over to our Twitter page, make your pick for what you think is the should be the winner, at least of those three. Remember to comment on the Twitter poll as well for a chance to win a prize. We've had a few, but not nearly as much as I thought we would. People, I'm giving away stuff, and it's cool stuff. I haven't announced them yet. I'm going to next week, a couple of them at least. I've got at least one signed puck. I've got some really cool Blues giveaways from the past that you've probably forgotten about. These are cool prizes, and I'm just surprised we're not, and maybe it's because I haven't revealed what they are. So if you want to win a prize, get on over there. Comment on the Twitter poll. And again, if you're not on Twitter, go over to the Facebook page, Let's Go Blues Radio, and you can comment there as well. We post a link to each Twitter poll over on Facebook as well. So if you comment there, those also count. So again, we've got a great guest coming up here, Mike Morreale, a friend of the show, someone we had on last week. So he returns. He's a two-time friend of the show with Let's Go Blues Radio, and we'll get to him right after this break and hear from our awesome sponsors with Let's Go Blues Radio.
We'll return after these messages.
Every beer league hockey night, I grab my hockey bag and sticks and throw them in the trunk of my car, and the very next thing I do, I mix up a boost of energy courtesy of RockinThatIDLife.com. It's formulated to break up its delivery in 3 ways, which helps me get through all 3 periods of hockey. Phase 1 provides a rapid onset of energy, concentration, alertness, and motivation. By period 2, I'm receiving a dose of sustained energy, increased focus, metabolism, cognitive function, performance, and feelings of well-being, which I need with the way I play. In Phase 3, I'm getting fatigue protection without jitters and crash, an elevated mood, and a reduction of fluid retention to help me make the big play when it counts. This same triphasic approach helps me when I drink it during work hours or simply just for a pick-me-up when I need it. Try one of the 4 energy flavors by visiting rockinthatidlife.com, but make sure to email Dustin at rockinthatidlife@gmail.com and tell him Let's Go Blues Radio sent you to receive an additional 10% off your order. That's rockinthatidlife.com.
Center Ice Brewery is a beer lover's dream for hockey fans. Based in St. Louis, Missouri, owner Steve Albers has been brewing hockey-themed favorites for thirsty sports fans since 2017. From the Beauty IPA to the Old Arena Lager, a cold, frosty, hockey-themed beer is just what the doctor ordered for hockey fans in St. Louis. Make sure to check your local beer store for Center Ice Brewery beer today. LGB. Let's go beer.
During the magical 2019 playoff run, I was in the midst of buying my current home. Every time I spoke with my realtor, obviously, home buying was the discussion. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about what was destined to happen for our St. Louis hockey team. If only there were a realtor who could have walked me through the process, held my hand when needed, but was there to be a sounding board when I wanted to complain about a certain hand pass goal. Let realtor Mike Burgoyne with Real Brokerage be that for you. He'll have your needs top of mind as he skates you through the home buying or selling process, dangling you past any obstacles and assisting on all your home goals. Check out strikewithmike.com for more information or give him a call directly at 314-753-4060. That's Mike Burgoyne with Real Brokerage at strikewithmike.com, and that number again is 314-753-4060. Don't forget to tell Mike that Let's Go Blues Radio sent you.
And now, back to Let's Go Blues Radio, the longest running St. Louis Blues podcast with Price, Ponder, and Day.
And welcome back from break. Right now, we're joined by Mike Morreale of NHL.com. He's a staff writer over there, co-host of the NHL Draft Class podcast, actually already a friend of the show. We had him on last year, if you remember, so he is rejoining us to talk about his work with the NHL and with the upcoming draft. He's a very big prospect guru. Also, as we mentioned last year, New Jersey High School Ice Hockey Hall of Fame member, of course. Can't forget that. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. What an introduction. I appreciate that. And yes, you were one of the few that actually mentioned the high school work that I was able to do. That actually I was able to get the jump start there, covering the high school game in New Jersey, which was fantastic. The Kyle Palmieris, the James Van Riemsdykes. It was just amazing to see high school hockey grow and flourish in the Garden State and to be a part of it. And it led me to where I am today. So I'm very grateful for high school hockey.
So I'm not poking fun, but we can hear a bit of an accent. So are you a New Jersey native as well?
I am. I am a New Jersey native. I've always been in northern New Jersey for the most part. Born and raised. Went to school there, and I went to college in the southern part of New Jersey at Rider University in Lawrenceville. So it was all good, and you are certainly not the first to recognize that accent. I get hit with that on numerous occasions. Get me a cup of coffee and all kinds of things. So it's always fun, and I'm right there with it. Hey, I'm proud of my accent. What can I say, Jeff?
Oh, I'm with you. That's what we say here in St. Louis. People give us trouble. St. Louis, Midwest. No, I'm proud to be from St. Louis. I love where I'm from. And I'll tell you, I've been to New Jersey. I've been all over New Jersey, honestly. Beautiful part of the country. That there's a reason they call it the Garden State.
Yeah, it is. I was fortunate with my grandparents. They lived down the Jersey Shore. We had a big garden, all kinds of things. We worked during the day. At night, we sold some of the vegetables with our own little stand in front of the house. It was a labor of love as young kids, and then we were rewarded by going to one of the lakes and a nearby town in South Jersey, in Lakehurst or Forked River, wherever it might be, which was outstanding. So fun times, memorable days. Those summers on the Jersey Shore. So. But yeah, there's a lot to like about the Garden State, and I'm glad you think so, Jeff. I'm glad you think so.
Oh yeah, I visited a bunch of the rinks out there as well. Some really nice facilities out there. I'm drawing a blank on the one that I visited a lot. But what rink are you at a lot? I mean, I know that clearly you're covering the Devils, which we'll get to in a minute, their current run. But in terms of maybe not NHL rinks, where's one that you're at a lot there in New Jersey?
Yeah, well, I mean, several of the rinks when I covered it's funny because a lot of the high school rinks in New Jersey when I covered the high school game, there weren't a lot of them, and I think that's what made it difficult for high school teams to field those hockey programs. But now, I've been out of the loop for high school hockey a little bit since I joined NHL.com in 2008. But now I'm hearing that it's doubled the amount of rinks in New Jersey since I've stopped covering the high school game, which is fantastic because you see more and more teams coming in and joining the ranks because there are more arenas, there are more ice surfaces in those arenas, usually 2 to 3 in each arena. I go to Menon Arena a lot when I was, and I still do. A lot of the Morris County teams there, the Del Bartons, which is usually a powerhouse. Cody Arena in West Orange, which actually was where the Devils used to practice before they built the Prudential Center, which now has a practice facility attached to the main rink. So there's no need for the Devils to even leave the area there in Newark. They can just practice and then just go to the main rink. But Cody Arena, which was originally called South Mountain Arena, used to be the practice facility for the Devils. That's back in the the 90s and the early 2000s when the Devils were winning their cups with the Danicos and the Scott Stevens and those players, Patrick Eliash, they were practicing over there. So that was another arena I went to regularly because a lot of the championships, high school championships, were held there. And we were very fortunate, Jeff, that Lou Lamoriello, who was general manager of the Devils at the time when I was covering high school hockey, wanted the high school championships to be played in the arena. And at that time, it was Continental Airlines Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey. And that was way back in I want to say 85, 86. They started having the high school games there at Continental. And it was a great thrill for the high school players to experience what it was like to get dressed in a high school locker room, to play on that ice surface, to hear your name over the scoreboard, just the overall atmosphere when the bus comes in and drives, close to the Zamboni entrance where the players get out. Just that feeling of being a professional really stood out for the player. And a lot of these kids, and Jeff, it's like for a lot of these kids, this is a once in a lifetime experience because the majority of them, particularly those, coming up through the ranks in New Jersey, aren't going to be playing professional hockey. This is it for them. They'll play 4 years of high school hockey. They'll experience it. They'll be with their friends. They'll have some great memories to share later in life. But this is it for them. So to experience that, the thrill of it, the luncheon that they had that Lou always hosted for the 4 finalists that were in the championship round was always a thrill for them. Lou used to talk and the coaches used to speak. So it was always a thrill. So, I'm glad to see there are more and more rinks popping up in New Jersey. Of course, I spend most of my time at Prudential Center covering the Devils, but every so often, I'm treated to maybe a high school game or seeing a girls game for that matter too. Girls hockey has really grown in New Jersey as well at one of the local rinks, which is always fun.
Bridgewater was the one I was trying to think
Bridgewater
of.
Sports Arena, yes.
Yep,
I was
spent
there plenty
a lot
of
of
times.
time at
Yes.
Bridgewater. That's a great arena, great
Yes.
facility, and in a beautiful part of New Jersey as well.
Yes.
But yeah, so again, you're talking about a little bit of before we get to talking about some of the prospects coming up in this upcoming draft. I did want to ask you because you are covering New Jersey right now, the Devils for the Stanley Cup playoffs for NHL.com. Clearly we know how the series is going. It's been a fun playoff run for them. But in terms of just covering, because again, you do a lot of coverage for the draft for upcoming players, but now you're seeing these NHL players all the time. Clearly, you've been with NHL.com since 2008. who's someone right now that you're covering that you love, just and maybe not even because of a personal level, but somebody that you're covering right now for the Devils who's just you love watching play, and you kind of, because again, I used to be in the media. I get it partially. You're like, I can't root for these guys, but I'm rooting for that guy because he's a great guy and he's a great skater and a great whatever. Who is that for you right now?
It's funny you say that too, Jeff, real quick, because, you have a favorite team growing up as a kid, right? And then when you're in the business, in the field, and in my case, working for .com, so I'm covering basically all 32 teams, you become a fan of every team. There's something about every team that really piques your interest, right? That really intrigues you about the team, whether it be a player, whether it be something the coach said, uh, whatever it may be. So there's always that interest, and I enjoy watching all 32 teams, and I do have likes about every one of the teams. But as in terms of the Devils, there are two players that came to mind right away when you were talking there, and that was Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes. Both those players, I covered extensively prior to their draft year, so they knew me pretty well entering the draft. And now when I enter the Devils locker room, they know me. Like, it's funny, like Nico Hischier, every so often, if there's not a lot of people entering after a morning skate, or if it's quiet after a off day practice, like Nico will hold out his fist for a fist bump when he sees me and say, "Hey, how's it going? We'll talk about life. We'll talk about family." And Jack's the same way. In fact, Jack, just yesterday when I was at the practice for the Devils, there was no one around Jack's locker, which is unusual. Usually there's a huge crowd, but on game days there is, and there was a big crowd around his locker stall this morning. But yesterday, during the off day, they left Jack alone. So I was just walking around, and I happened to walk by his locker, and he said, "Hey, what do you think about the lottery? Who's going to win the lottery? Who's going to be, the second overall pick? We know about the first overall pick." So it's just things like that, for me personally, it's a lot of fun, right? Because you've covered these guys, you know what they're like off the ice, they're personable, and then when you get them in the interviews with in media scrums, whether the Canadian media is coming up for a day, they have to be put on that business like persona to make sure they sound professional, but really. They're still kids, right, Jeff? They're still kids. They're 20-year-old kids that are just playing the game they love. And I really appreciate that, and it's just a cool experience. Now that I've been at .com for over 14, 15 years now, it's just a lot of fun seeing the players that I cover in a draft eligible season just grow and grow and grow to become these elite level players, elite level um, guys that are now winning awards. And let's face it, I know Jack's up for the Lady Byng for the sportsmanship trophy this year, one of the finalists, and Nico Hischier is up for one of the most prestigious NHL awards, which is the Selke. So both those players, I'm proud of them and what they've accomplished, and I'm proud to say that I know them not only on the ice but off the ice as well.
Yeah, I've again, similar situation with Ian Cole, current
Mm.
NHL player. When he was drafted by the Blues, he spent a lot of time in the Peoria Rivermen organization, which is about a 2-hour drive here from St. Louis. And I went and covered him a couple times up in Peoria, getting prospect looks and that kind of thing. And there was a couple times where when he first joined the Blues, I would ask him, I'd ask the media relations coordinator for the Blues, Dan O'Neill, can you get Ian Cole for me? Yeah, no problem. So I did that like 2 or 3 times. And then like the fourth game I was at, I didn't do it. He comes out and he goes, "What? You don't want to interview me today?" And I'm like, I mean, I guess I can. And so I interviewed him. And so every time after that, for about the next 6 or 7 games I was at, I had to ask the media relations coordinator, Dan O'Neill, "Hey man, can you go get Ian Cole for me?" And he finally just rolls his eyes and he's like, "Am I going to do this every game?" And I'm like,
Mm.
"As long as he's a Blue, yes, I think you're going to have to."
Good stuff.
So,
That's good stuff.
yeah, I mean, it's just you love the personality in some of these guys. I've told stories on the show about David Backes, Ryan Reeves. Like
Mm.
when you get to actually know these guys and know the people they are, you can't help but root for them just a little bit.
Yeah, real quick too, on that top, like when I covered high school hockey in Jersey, James Van Riemsdyk was an up and coming kid. He played for Christian Brothers Academy, which is usually a powerhouse. They play at the Wall Ice Arena in Middletown, New Jersey. So I was watching him when he came in as a freshman, real, very didn't want to talk to the media, was very shy. But boy, when he got on the ice, he was like an animal. He was a beast, one of the best players out there. And I covered him his first 2 years, covered him a little bit at the NTTP. And when he was drafted and started playing in the National Hockey League, when I entered the locker room and he was there with the Flyers, he would call me Mr. Morreale. And I went over to him. I says, JVR, you're well beyond that now. You don't need to call me Mr. Morreale. Just call me Mike. That's fine. I don't want to be, that old veteran sport, nagging sports writer. Just call me Mike and let's call it a day. So he calls me Mike now. Yeah, yeah.
Good. I'm glad he does now, finally.
Yeah.
NHL veteran for 15 years. He's finally calling you Mike.
That's it. Good stuff. It's good stuff.
So speaking of some of these prospects coming up, obviously there's a couple names that we've all heard thrown around, but before we get to that, I wanted to ask you in general. The talk has been this is a very deep draft, The Blues have 3 picks. Talking about the team here in this first round, I mean, comparatively speaking to other rounds, and I'm not asking for specific years or specific players picked, but just kind of in recent memory, how deep is this draft comparatively speaking?
Yeah, this draft is very deep, Jeff. Yeah, every year I'm probably going to tell you that there's some depth to the draft, and again, there is depth and there's quality. But I think one thing that sticks out this year for me is the skill component. There's a lot of high end skill players available in this draft class, and that's one thing to me that really sticks out. High caliber forwards. There are quite a few centermen in this draft class, and not only Bedard at the top, but there's quite a few centermen that have really made a name for themselves, over the second half of this particular season. Defensively, it might not be the type of year that we're accustomed to. There are a few big names on the defensive side of things, and we'll probably get into those. But for the most part, forward wise, I think every team that has a pick in the first round is going to get someone that potentially could play a huge role in, if not a top 6, certainly a top 9 role. We got, like I said, the skill is there. A lot of 200-foot players that get the job done, and a lot of the players in this draft class as well, Jeff, I must say, represented their countries at the World Junior Championships and really played exceptionally well. Usually when you're an underage player on those teams, and look, we all know that's a 19-year-old tournament. And this year it was held in Nova Scotia, and it was fantastic. But there were several players, including a lot of goaltenders in that tournament, that really stood out to me and have a really legitimate chance of not only being selected early in this draft, but making an impact, if not in 2 years, certainly 3-4 years down the road.
So we can't talk about this draft class without first mentioning the projected number 1 pick in Connor Bedard. Last year we saw Shane Wright was the name that I remember you and I discussed a lot, and he ended up dropping pretty far. I think it was number 4.
Yeah.
And we saw Slafkovsky take the first spot with Montreal. First of all, that's not happening this year, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Connor Bedard is going to be a Chicago Blackhawk.
Yeah, the most gifted NHL draft prospect we have seen in 6 years since Austin Matthews in 2016. Obviously, everyone talks about Connor McDavid in 2015 too. If you want to go back that far, I don't see any reason why you couldn't. He's generational because to me, he's more than just a franchise-changing player. I went to Regina, Jeff, for a weekend of games in March, and sat down with Bedard in the stands at Brandt Center. The thing that really we know the kid is full of talent. You can see it. It's obvious. The shot is unreal. His skating is sensational. And he comes at you east-west, where McDavid, when you watch McDavid skate and is looking to push the pace, McDavid is more that north-south type of guy, power in the legs. He's going to drive you back. Whereas Bedard is more the guy that he's looking to catch defensemen leaning one way. When he gets them leaning one way by going east or west, he's going to shoot the opposite direction. He has the speed to do it, pass, and then go north-south. So it's just a little tweak in styles with the skating that I see. But so dynamic, the smarts, the IQ, out of this world. And to think that the ceiling is still high for Connor Bedard. He hasn't reached the pinnacle of play, his NHL, performance yet. So we'll see him in the NHL next year for sure. I'm sure he'll have a real solid season, despite the fact that might not be a lot of people around him. But the one thing I want to say about Bedard real quick is his off the ice. And the one thing I know, on the ESPN production last night prior to the lottery, Kevin Weeks had a little bit an interview with Bedard. And the thing that struck me about that interview was when Weeksy asked Bedard about, some of the players that he grew up idolizing or, wanting to emulate now as a player. And he mentioned Sidney Crosby. Now, we all know, yes, a lot of young players want to emulate and model Sidney Crosby. But the thing that struck me, and this is what I see in Bedard when we sat down and we spoke as well, was the fact that he talked about his off the ice demeanor. It wasn't just the skill on the ice and what Crosby can bring as a 200-foot player. It was more what he did for the community, how he is with fans, how he signs autographs, how he's always there to take pictures and be with the fans because they're the ones that make it possible for him to play the game he enjoys and to relish those opportunities. So he just gets it, right, Jay? He gets it. And it's unlike, I got to say, it's unlike any prospect that I've ever covered since I've been at .com because of that thinking that he has, that mentality off the ice, his demeanor off the ice. When I sat down with him, he actually, before we started the interview, he said, "So how's everything going for you here in Regina? Are you comfortable? Can I make any suggestions on where to go to eat?" Like, who does
Wow.
what 17-year-old does that, right? In an interview, this, Jet. It's like I was like blown away just by the fact that here's a 17-year-old kid asking me, how can I make you more comfortable? Where I'm kind of worried about, is he kind of intimidated that I'm going to ask him a question that he can't answer? But he was, 100%. He was all good with everything I asked, whether it was a question that might have been controversial, whether it was a question that was a softball. It didn't matter. He answered it the same way. He didn't give you the robotic stuff. It's all coming from the heart and things he says. And he is a true team player. He'll always talk about his teammates. He'll always give you more about his teammates than when you ask him for stuff about himself, his best assets or what he feels he's good at. Those will be the short answers. The longer answers, if you ask him about teammates and other players that he's played against, that's when he'll give you the big, long responses. So just a phenomenal kid, Jeff. And I tell you, the Chicago Blackhawks and their fans should be real fortunate that they're getting this kid because he's going to be dynamite.
Everything that you just said is going to anger Blues fans even more because they're like, dude, we have to hate this kid. Like, what are you doing?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
that was the conversation in St. Louis is, oh my God, of course, this kid's going to Chicago, and you think like Anaheim, Columbus, okay, we'll have to deal with that twice, 3 times a year. Chicago, no, you're going to see this kid plenty. And Blues and Blackhawks clearly in a bit of a rebuild right now. Chicago takes the step forward, and you mentioned it. They don't have a whole lot right now. They had a lot of they had a rough year last year, let's say.
Yeah.
They got a ton of cap space. They could be. I'm not saying they're gonna build up into a Stanley Cup playoff or a Stanley Cup favorite next year, but with Bedard, that definitely ups that rebuild pretty quickly for them.
Yeah, it does. It does. But the last time the Blues, I think, picked inside the top 10 of the draft, it might have been back in 2008. I'm just off the top of my head there, when they
That's
took
correct.
Pietrangelo,
Yep.
Pietrangelo 4th overall. So, for me, Jeff, and I respect what Blues management has done here. They've taken a patient approach to prospect development over the past, decade plus. The players St. Louis usually drafts, those are typical project type prospects from where they're drafting, 3-5 years away from reaching the show. And they focus primarily, on forward depth and a lot of these drafts by picking up the likes of a Jimmy Snuggerud, Zachary Balduke and Jake Neighbors, who, is on the cusp of some greatness here. with 3 of its most recent first round choices. So I look, I like what the Blues have done in the past, and I know it's unfortunate. Look, the other 31 teams in the league are kicking themselves. Even the teams in the playoffs are thinking to themselves, "Geez, this Bedard." They're either saying, "Well, at least he's out of the conference." In the case of the Devils, right? At least we don't have to deal with him in the Eastern Conference. And then for teams like the St. Louis Blues in the division, they're like, "Oh no, now we got to deal with this kid 3-4 times in the course of a regular season." But you do get to see him that many times a season, which should be a special treat. Just as long as he doesn't, pot a hat trick every time the Blues happen to play him.
That's what I say whenever Connor McDavid and the Oilers come to town. Is I'm like, hey, you know what? There's a chance
Yes.
the Blues get laughed out of the building, but you're seeing one of the greatest players of all time play the
Absolutely.
game. And not say we don't want to project that onto Bedard. It's too soon for that. We hope he has a good NHL career, even though he's a Blackhawk. We do hope that for him as a great young kid, as you've mentioned. But yeah, I mean, there's something about going back to my younger days, seeing Wayne Gretzky play. I quick story. I took one of my favorite players of all time, Mario Lemieux. I tried to see him every time he came to St. Louis. There was illness. There was, the Hodgkin's lymphoma. I even went up to Chicago twice to try and see him play against the Blackhawks. Both games he missed. So I never actually got to see Lemieux play. But seeing those great players play is it's a treat. Even if at the time you're just like, oh, that McDavid guy, oh, but it's like you're seeing greatness play in front of your eyes. There's something special about that.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. You said it wonderfully there. It's like, when growing up, I followed the Flyers a lot. And this was during the 80s when they had Pelle Lindbergh and David Poulin, Peter Zezel, Ilke Sinisalo. So those were the teams that I liked. That Mike Keenan was the coach of that team. I just had a love for watching the Flyers, the way they played, the defensive approach they had, and their offense. And Davey Poulin was the captain. Now, maybe Davey Poulin to some out there isn't the most, I don't know, the all-star type player that you would expect. But to me, he was, just because of the role he played with the Flyers during those days and just his mindset, demeanor, and the way he played the game. I just really respected and admired. So when I had a chance to see him, not only as a fan, but now that he's an analyst, a hockey analyst, Jeff, I see him in the media room every so often. So just a chance to go up to and talk to someone that he used to have a jersey of with his name on the back. There's something special about that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I've told this story on the show before, but the one time I walk, you meet Al McInnes, in the Blues locker rooms, you meet it, and there's a little bit of fanboy in you that's like, whoa. But then
Yes.
you like kind of compose yourself. Okay. No big
We
deal.
try.
Yeah. Wayne Gretzky, saw him in the hallway. I was turning one corner. He was turning the other. He walked by me and I'm just looking at him. I'm like, oh, it's Wayne Gretzky. And he kind of looks at me. He's like, hey, man, how you doing? And I'm like, good.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and it was he just kind of smiled and kept walking. And I thought he probably deals with that all the time.
Yeah. Here's a quick story. Too. 2008, when I was just came aboard for .com, the All-Star game was in Atlanta. At that time, we had maybe a crew of about 6 or 7 full-timers at the All-Star game, just doing several different stories. So the editor comes up to me and says, look, we need you to do something. Gordie Howe is here and he wants to go to both locker rooms, east, west. And we need you to go with Gordie and just make sure he knows the names of the players or recognizes the players as you're going into the locker rooms. And I was like, are you kidding me? It's like, I had to picture myself. So sure enough, Gordie comes up, I shake his hand, his hand just kind of envelopes my entire arm, Jeff. The guy was huge, just what you would think, one of the strongest hockey players alive. Here he is. And, it was fantastic. And I still remember to this day going into the Eastern Conference room and Alex Ovechkin was there. And when we went in, he was taping his sticks, and I said to Gore, I says, "There's Ovechkin," and he's like, "Oh," he goes, "I got to go over there and talk to him." So he goes over, and they had a little conversation. But can you believe, like, just the opportunity and the chance to be with Gordie Howe, to talk shop, talk hockey, talk life is a memory I'll never forget. Never forget.
It's incredible. Yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff you'll never forget. I've had moments like that. We all have. I know
Yep.
people who have been like, I went to a store and I saw David Backus and he talked to me for 20 minutes about hockey. And it's like those little interactions,
Yes.
even with just fans or just people who are in general, it means the world to them. And for these athletes to be able to do that and kind of recognize it and be like, people idolize me. Like, I need to be able to be the person they want me to be and expect me to be, and just being
Hmm.
able to see them live that is just incredible.
Good stuff. Yeah, it
Yep.
was.
Well, so speaking of these young impressionable kids, there's a couple other people that are coming pretty high. They're going to be picked very high in this draft. Adam Fantilli is another one who's from Michigan. He's a Hobie Baker winner. Thing I read about him is his speed and his wingspan are just such excellent aspects for him. Obviously, a good puck handler as well. But what stands out to you mostly about him, and will we see him in the NHL next season?
Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, there are rumors that he will look to maybe play in the NHL next year. I know that a lot of the players coming from Michigan have spent 2 seasons, including Luke Hughes, who is now with the Devils in the playoffs and played his first game 3, and probably will tonight in game 4. But that's it's still in the air whether he's going to be NHL ready. I guess it'll be determined by the Anaheim Ducks and what they have in store for him. But look, Fantilli, about 6'2", 195 pounds, won the Hobie Baker Award as a freshman this year, which is just ridiculous. Plays the power play. He kills penalties, is out there for key faceoffs. His coach, Brandon Naurato, with the Wolverines, put him in every situation. And he was their best player this year as a freshman, Jeff. And when I talked to Luke Hughes about him, what did he bring that maybe people didn't know? Luke told me that it was his leadership. It was like guys just gravitated towards him in the locker room, on the ice, because he was able to do and put up the points. And not only that, he was just a force of nature out there. If he wasn't playing in the NCAA this year, he would have probably gotten into maybe 3 or 4 fights, if it were the Canadian Hockey League or some other league that he was playing in, because every team, every college coach that was against Michigan this year had to devise some type of strategy to thwart Adam Fantilli. That's how good a player he was. And here's another player, right? Goes to the World Juniors with Bedard. And Canada, of course, won the gold medal in January. But Fantilli had to take a back seat to Bedard. He played a middle 6 role on a wing. He wasn't even playing the position that he'd been playing all season in Michigan, but he took the role, didn't care. He's being a part of the team, being a good teammate. And after the World Juniors, after winning that gold medal, he came back and he says, that did wonders for me. He says, at the time, I was ticked off. I do want to play, but I just played my game, did what I needed to do to help the team any way I could. But it's nice to see, like, he did what he needed to do. He was a good teammate, but he still had that fire about him, right? That I can do more than this, but for the benefit of the team, I'm going to do it this way. And then when he came back to Michigan, second half of the season, it was lights out. And that's what kind of, the sky was the limit for him, and he won the Hobie Baker, and deservedly so. He's well adapted because he's a good skater to the pace of play in the college game, had that major impact, and he's deadly in all areas of the ice and on special teams. So I think for Anaheim, you're looking at an Adam Fantilli. I think they'd be very happy with that pick.
Yeah, sounds like it. So again, many prospects that we could talk about here. We could go down a whole list of about 50, I'm sure, but we'll keep it to talking about where the Blues are picking now at number 10. We'll see them. I don't think we'll see any trades with that pick, but you never know. But if they stand pat and pick at number 10, there are some names that have been thrown around that we might see picked around that time. Dalibor Dvorsky, Daniil Butte, Gabriel Perreault. By the way, love Gabriel Perreault because his dad wore 94. So that's my favorite number. So good for you, kid. Hopefully you're a Blue. But who are you thinking the Blues might be looking at with that number 10 pick?
Yeah, you mentioned Dvorsky. That's a player from AIK and the Alvenskan, and he's had a fantastic year. 6'1", 201, 201, real good skater, great with the puck on his stick, has that ability to maintain possession, has real good vision, can win battles in the corner, shows great skill in tight places. And he led Slovakia with 13 points in 7 games at the U18 Worlds, which was fantastic. He's expected to become the 4th Slovakia-born player chosen in the first round of the draft in the past 2 years. And you mentioned earlier, Jeff, Slavkovsky, number 1 last year, Simon Nemetz to the Devils, number 2, and forward Philip Mesar to the Canadians at number 26 in the 22 draft. So like Dalibor Dvorsky, I think that'd be a great pick at number 10. Also, Nate Danielson, the center from the Brandon Wheat Kings, a talented two-way center, good scoring ability. Danielson really shot up Central Scouting's rankings from the midterm to the final to get into that first round projection. He's one of the better centermen still on the board when you reach that 9, 10, 11, 12 area. So if he's there, I think it'd be a positive pick. The Blues have needs throughout their lineup, and obviously, like we mentioned earlier, they started restructuring, but especially up front. And Danielson seems like not only a good option, but a solid stylistic type fit of the players the Blues typically draft. And then I really like the Edward Chalet from Brno in the Czech Republic. Had a real good World Junior Championship. Talented forward with great offensive instincts, can shoot and pass with real good accuracy. Goes about 6'2", 174, so a good size forward there. Has proven to be active in the offensive zone, presents a challenge for opposing defenders with that size and strength. Had 6 points in 5 games for Czechia at the U18 World. So in big moments, big situations, he's a guy that really picks up his pace and his play. So those are 3 players right there, Jeff, I think might be in that area for St. Louis. And I think all 3 are solid choices. Like I said, forward-wise, this draft is very deep. It goes maybe, I would say almost between 45 and 55 players deep where you're going to find a decent player that's going to be on your roster in 4 to 5 years at least. So these 3 players here, you're looking at solid prospects with a little maturing, nurturing, development in their leagues. I think they'll be solid guys 2-3 years down the road.
So you mentioned, obviously, the forward depth of this draft is ridiculous, but there are some defensemen that are sprinkled in that are going to be I mean, we're not going to have an all forward first round. That is to my knowledge never happened.
Never happened. No.
Yeah, but one name that stood out to me as a possible pick, and let's face it, the Blues defense last year was pretty atrocious. They fired their defensive coach. They're looking to make some changes, and I think clearly at number 10, you're not expecting a player to step in and play, especially if it's a defenseman next season. But if they are drafting for need at this point, like, okay, it's between 4 guys, but we need a defenseman. The name that I've seen pop up is Dmitry Simashev, defenseman from Russia, Yaroslavl Jr. From what I've read, just a good positionally sound two-way defenseman. Maybe not the greatest offensive dynamic talent, but great outlet pass, smooth skater. What are your thoughts on Simashev going into the draft?
Yeah, has real good size, about 6'4", 198. A little bit of a project. I think in 2 to 3 years, you'll see what you might be able to get. But I know he was number 19 on Central Scouting's final rankings. So he is a projected maybe late first, middle second, possible early third round type pick. But yeah, certainly he's a player that's going to be on everyone's radar. Those players from Russia, and I think Matvey Michkov is in the same boat here, right, Jeff? You're just not sure. Scouts haven't been able to really dive into what these guys have been about this year because of what's been going on in Russia, to put it bluntly. And I think there are some question marks as to how these players have been developing, how they've been maturing. So there's always that question mark. But certainly Simashev has really shown what he's capable of doing. You mentioned a lot of the qualities he has there. Has a real good shot, has that size. He puts it to good use, and certainly is a good skater for a player of his size. So he played 33 games this year in Russia's junior league. So certainly with a little more maturing, maybe playing in the KHL for a season or two, that development will help him maybe speed up the process a little bit. That's what we expect him to do. He'll probably play some international events. Next season he'll be on the board with those clubs for sure. So we'll see a little bit more of him and what he's capable of doing. But for the most part, yeah, I think Simashev is one of those players that's going to be one of those sleeper type picks when you look at players going maybe later in the draft.
Yeah, and you got to figure too that with the Blues having 3 first-round picks, if
Yes.
they make all 3 of those picks and he's still on the board with one of your later picks, that's definitely a name I think you're considering. Another one, Tom Willander, defenseman from Rogel Jr., somebody that people have been talking about with a later pick from Sweden. Uh, Lots of greatness coming from him, but any other defenseman that maybe stand out to you that, and again, not, and I think Blues fans need to understand, and most of them do, I think, we're not seeing these guys in the NHL next year
No.
unless they just
No.
have a ridiculous camp and it's just, okay, we can't not play this guy. But, you're talking with the Blues, the contracts they have on D, having a couple of these guys pop up in 2 to 3 years, that's what you're looking at. Any other defensemen stand out to you?
Yeah, there are two that could drop just because of what I've been talking about with the forwards and teams wanting to get in on the forwards quickly in the first round. David Reinbacher from Austria, Austria-born right shot defenseman, 22 points with Cloten in the National League in Switzerland's top division there. And he had 2 assists in 5 games for Austria at the 23 World Junior Championships. He's number 5 on Central Scouting's final list of international skaters. He's a right-hand shot, well-rounded defenseman, a good physical presence about him. I thought he had a great World Juniors. He's seldom out of position, plays a mature game, is involved and active, and can play aggressive and tough when needed. And then the other guy who I've been watching closely a lot, I liked his play at World Juniors. Not sure if he'll be available, but again, you just never know. Axel Sandan Palika of Sweden, the defenseman there, another right shot. He's number 7 on the final list of international players. Considered one of the most improved prospects in Sweden this season. Offensive-minded defenseman. He kind of, reminds one a little bit of a Quinn Hughes type, maybe a Ryan Ellis. Real good set skills, great offensive instincts. Has a real hard shot from the point. Is a little small, on the smaller side at 5'11", 176, but he skates real well, knows how to stay out of trouble, uses his stick to gap up really well, plays bigger than he is, and has that real good work ethic that you like to see in these young players. And I think this is a kid that certainly could go top 25, top 30 in the draft, depending on, of course, how things fall with the forwards from both the North American and the international side.
So somebody who might come out of the first round, maybe late or even in the later rounds, asking for your sleeper pick here. Who's somebody you've got, and maybe it's a couple players you've got your eye on that are like, okay, this kid may not go until the 3rd round, but this kid's going to be in the NHL.
Yeah, the forward Lenny Hamanahu, I don't know where he's going to fall. I know a lot of teams have liked what they've seen, a lot of scouts and general managers that I've spoken to. A right-hand shot, 5'11", 173. He's one of the youngest players in Liga this year, Finland's top professional men's league. I thought he played really well at Assat in 28 games. Plays that mature game, competitive, is active and has an excellent work ethic. Has real smooth hands, is effective in traffic, good at handling the puck and in situations that may become a little stressful. Plays with a lot of confidence. A real confident player. Isn't afraid to getting involved and often comes out as a winner in battles along the board. So I think Lenny Hamanahu from Finland is a player that you can keep on your radar if you're a team looking for maybe some type of sleeper down the road. And I don't want to forget Charlie Strimel. He played for the United States at the World Juniors too. He was number 30 on the North American side for the final list. So maybe a second round pick, mid-second round, right-handed shot, big size, 6'3", 212. Went to the University of Wisconsin this year as a freshman. They struggled, of course, but he kind of regained his confidence a little bit. Real big physical presence, and has a great stick. Really good on the penalty kill with his stick details, and he's a really good face-off guy too. So he's a very versatile player, and with the proper development, he can pick up that scoring and do the things that he wanted to do that he couldn't in Wisconsin this year. And he'll enter Wisconsin a second season and see where it goes from there. But I like what I saw on Stramel, and he could be a nice player to draft at some point, maybe mid-second round. If he doesn't go as high as there, then maybe he'd be a late second, third round pick. I think would be a fine choice.
So I've got to ask final question here for you. Goalie on my panel, on my usual live shows, will want to know this. Will there be a goalie picked in the first round?
There will not be a goalie picked in the first round this year. I just think we're too stocked at forward, and then the few defensemen that we mentioned could also go off the board. International side is really loaded, so the goaltending is pretty weak on the international side of things. On the North American side, Carson Bjarnason from Brandon could be a goalie that's taken maybe mid-second, late second round. Michael Harabel from Omaha, the United States Hockey League, had a fantastic second half of the season. So he's another one that could. And Trey Augustine, who was the starting goalie for the United States at the 23 World Junior Championships, had a great season at the USA Hockey's National Team Development Program under 18 team. So another goalie there that could go off the board, maybe mid-second, third round as well. So no goalies this year, Jeff, going in the first round from what I see.
Sorry, Bill. It's unfortunate for you, buddy. Mike,
Right.
Always a pleasure having you on the show. Please, before we let you go, let our listeners know how they can find you on social media, where they can find all of your work, and how they can and what to expect from the NHL Draft Class podcast over at NHL.com.
Well, fans can catch me on Twitter at Mike Morreale, NHL. I have plenty of content on NHL.com right now. As you mentioned earlier, Jeff, I do a lot of the Devils work. So I'm in the midst of that Devils Hurricane series right now, which is a thrill a minute. Both teams winning their home games. So we'll see what the Devils can do and kind of rebound here to even or maybe even win this series. So that's been a lot of fun. And then as far as the draft goes, I'll maintain and continue the draft coverage. We'll have prospect profiles on a lot of the players that we mentioned here today. And then the NHL Draft Class podcast with co-host Adam Kimmelman. We'll be starting to ramp up the shows maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks. And then, that month leading up to the draft, we'll have a show once a week with some of the scouts from Central Scouting, talking about the players in their particular regions. And of course, it's always a fun time when we're able to discuss, some of those up and coming prospects that are in development camps and what they're, capable of doing for their respective teams, for their organizations that could be playing on the teams in the real near future. So it's always a fun time on the NHL Draft Class podcast. So fans can catch that on any one of their favorite podcast platforms, Apple and Spotify, and we're all over, as far as that goes, with catching us there. So all good stuff,
Awesome.
Jeff.
Well, thanks again to Mike for coming on the show. It was a very late notice thing, too. I messaged him, I believe it was Monday night, and I just was like, hey, I know this is last minute. We'd love to get you on this week if you can. He made time for me. We did it. We recorded on Tuesday. Just a quick turnaround. And these guys know that a lot of this stuff, it's like, hey, we need you very quickly, with the news of where the Blues are picking. But still, it's very, I appreciate when these guys can step in last minute and be a guest on a show like ours. It's just so great. Hockey community, can't say enough about it. Everybody's willing to help each other out, and it's great. I just really appreciate that kind of stuff. Plus, he's a cool dude. We sat and rapped. You all heard, us talk about our experiences. So just always good having good people on the show. So next week, folks, we'll have our first all-time team reveal. I don't know who will be joining me yet. But remember, we've got that panel of 11 people. So we will be having at least one person coming on. I don't know if it's somebody from Let's Go Blues Radio or otherwise, to talk about who is the three best left-handed defensemen of all time picked by you, the fans. Is Chris Pronger making the cut? Is Barrett Jackman, Noel Picard, Jay Bouwmeester, Carl Gunnarsson, Al Arbor, Paul Cavallini? I mean, we went through the Blues all time and made these selections. So who makes the cut? There's some really good picks out there. We will see. Make sure you tune in next week to find out what left-handed defensemen make the Blues all-time team, at least according to Let's Go Blues Radio and its listeners. That'll do it for this week's show. Support for Let's Go Blues Radio is brought to you in part by RockinThatIDLife.com, where spring cleaning isn't just for your home. Let's clean up your health together. Visit RockinThatIDLife.com for more information. That's RockinThatIDLife.com, and get 10% off by emailing Dustin at RockinThatIDLife@gmail.com and tell him Let's Go Blues Radio sent you. And by Mike Burgoyne from Rio Brokerage Realty. Visit strikewithmike.com today for all of your home buying and selling needs. That's strikewithmike.com. And by Center Ice Brewery, St. Louis's tasty hockey-themed beer. Check out centericebrewery.com and navigate to their Where to Find Us page for availability. That's Center Ice Brewery beer. Please drink responsibly. That'll do it for episode 3 of season 12 of the original St. Louis Blues hockey podcast, Let's Go Blues Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great week, everyone. For Kurt Price, Bill Day, and producer Austin, I'm Jeff Ponder, and I'll talk with you next week. This was Let's Go Blues Radio. Until next time, everyone, let's go Blues.
Sit, Ubu, sit. Good dog.
You thought I was going to say, son of a bitch, didn't you?